Right, okay, so let's talk about a hybrid feeder. We've got some pellets here. Now, what I want is I'm going to load this feeder up. I'm not going to press these in really hard. In fact, let's start again. Let me get another feeder. I'm not going to press these really hard because everything is exaggerated when you cast a feeder out. If I'm casting a feeder out, even if it's 15, 20 metres, the aggression in which that feeder hits that surface is completely different to me dropping it in a tank. Completely different. Also, holes are a big importance for me. I don't want holes in the bottom of the feeder. I found this feeder. That's why I've not blocked the holes up. I always block the holes up because, watch this. See all that water spray out through the holes? So you can imagine the force of water as that feeder hits the surface like that, that's going into the pellets that you're trying to keep within that feeder. So all my feeders, the holes are blocked up. Now, I believe that a feeder never hits the bottom, hits the surface like that. It will always hit the surface like that or like that. So therefore, that's why a hybrid feeder is so good, because you've got a wall at the front of the feeder that's protecting the bait. At the end of the day, the principle of what you want to try and achieve, regardless of the depth or the terrain that you're fishing in, that feeder hits the bottom and it's still got bait in the feeder. The fish have a focal point, a reason to home in on your feed, therefore your hook bait. If there's no feed in that hook bait, in that feeder, there's no reason for them to take your hook bait. So your presentation with your bait preparation, your feeder choice, I can't stress how important it is. So what I do, and this is why this is a coaching lesson for you to adapt your fishing. Don't tell anybody this, keep it to yourself. If you want to beat people around you, it's up to you to think of ways of beating them. They're not going to help you become a better angler, you are, okay? So, for example, I put lead on the bottom of the feeder, I weigh them at home, so I know exactly how much each feeder weighs. So if all of a sudden, let's say I'm on this venue here, 35 gram, I'm hitting the clip, everything's nice, all of a sudden the wind picks up, I can't hit my clip properly, I put a 37 gram or a 38 gram. If you don't spend time at home doing your homework and doing your prep, you're not going to advance an angler, So you can't just expect to buy a feeder on the shelf and expect it to be right. Adapt it. So now, actually, I've blocked those holes up, which is going to slow the process of these pellets breaking down. That means I can leave my feeder in for longer periods of time, if I need to in the winter months, or dictated by how the fish are feeding and how my peg's working. So I create what we call a flat table. I then put the hook bait on, but what I do not do is I do not press the hook bait into that base. I press the hook on like that. I'm not even pressing the hook in, I'm pressing the hook on, almost as if it's just holding on. I then get some pellets, turn the feeder over, press it very gently, and I create a mound on the top. Now this is where people go wrong. They will then press down on that, but if you're pressing down on that, what's going to happen? Exactly, right? I want to pinch around the hook bait like a diamond, like a triangle, like that. See triangle being formed?
You can press in that top layer but not pushing the hook bait.
That's right. And then one squeeze on the top, like that. Now let's put that into the tank. All good, Tom?
All good, mate.
Now, because I've soaked these pellets up a particular way, they're soft and spongy. Therefore, as soon as they enter the water, look at what's happening to them. They're wanting to expand and push back out. And gradually, what will happen is that hook bait will become visible and it will end up rolling away from the feeder, like so. So basically, what I want to achieve is the principle what I've always believed with method feeder work. That gone are the days where you chuck your feeder and you get that, where the unwise fish, the uneducated fish, are actually attacking the feeder. That used to happen, but as fish get wiser, they get older. As they get older, they get wiser. They understand that it's a contraption, a danger contraption, but it's food at the same time. Now what happens is you get the odd sign that there may be fishing present in your area, but they actually feed on the outer particles. They might come down once or twice, feed on the particles, and bugger off. Therefore, I want my hook bait to roll away from my feeder every single time, regardless of whether I'm on a commercial, open water. That is the attraction, but the particles then spread around over a wider area. You can imagine if a fish comes in, it'll just spread that bait a bit over. You've always got particles around. So it's really important to understand that process. No matter how you think, your hook bait will never remain in the centre of that feeder. And I don't want it to be like that. That is the beauty about preparing your bait properly. Now I know when I'm fishing, my feeder, my bait is working exactly how I want it to. That's the benefits you get from just spending time at home, doing your bait preparation, experimenting, getting everything balanced tackle. So that's a hybrid feeder. Now the beauty about the reaction with a feeder is though that bait will come back clean, because half the time when you lift up, especially, it's very rare I'll be leaving that in unless you get a bite, right, for 1-2 minutes. That'll be in for 8-10 minutes, you know, especially on open water venues. Especially when a fish picks up that bait, what happens is it will kick that bait out, and this is why you get a delayed reaction. So you can imagine the pellets are still in that feeder but loose. The fish hooks itself, the feeder's lifted off the bottom, the fish feels a hook, it panics, it runs off, the feeder, the bait out of the feeder's kicked up off the bottom. So now you're creating a delayed feeding pattern where all of a sudden you've got another feed within your feed. All of a sudden you chuck back out, you put your rod down, you get a bite straight away. It creates that competition for feeding fish. Does that make sense? Exactly the same principle. You're fishing hard pellet on the pole. You sat there, you lift and drop, nothing. You feed. All of a sudden you feed, it makes noise on the surface, your float goes under. You're creating exactly the same kind of reaction with a feeder. People think feeder fishing is about chuck it out, leave it. Chuck it out, leave it. You've got to think what's happening underneath the water with your feeder, and you can turn a feeder into a float. That's how I think. Right, so that's a hybrid feeder. Now let me show you something, what happens when a lot of people do this. They add ground bait to pellets. Now you'll be amazed what happens here. So let's put a different tank on. So we've got some ground bait. Let's do let's do 50-50, okay? So we've got some ground bait. Got some pellets. Like that. I'm not even going to press it in hard, but this is why I don't use ground bait with a hybrid feeder. What do you think is going to happen? No, it's going to be a completely dead mix. Nothing is going to happen. Why is that?
The ground bait filling out out.
Exactly. Now that looks so cool, doesn't it? But watch this. So yeah, the top layer comes off, and it wouldn't surprise me even if the hook bait doesn't come out of the feeder. So you're not actually fishing. You're not fishing. The fish can't see your bait. Everything is dead. That's why you don't add ground bait to pellets for a hybrid feeder. The only time it makes a difference is if you want a delayed feeding pattern. So let's say, for example, you're an open water venue, middle of summertime, but you know you're fishing for 2 or 3, but let's say Boddingtons. It's fishing rock hard or that kind of style, or bream water, where actually you want a real delayed response, where you could be leaving that feeder in for 30, 40, 50 minutes. That's where ground bait actually may play a big part. But what you have to do differently then, you have to load your feeder up differently to ensure that your hook bait appears quickly. Look how dead it is. The hook bait's not even appeared. Yeah, does that make sense?
You put your hook bait on the top then?
Nearer the top.
Well, then, can you not just fish it out?
Fish what out?
Hook bait out of the feeder.
Yeah, but what might
How's it
happen?
rolling out anyway with the pellets?
It sounds great, that, doesn't it?
I'm
So, the reason why you bury your hook bait in the feeder is you're protecting the point of the hook, right? If you don't protect that point of the hook, as that feeder hits the surface, that hook could catch onto your feeder, or even to the point, that hook could hook onto that, or hook onto the stem. You're actually making your fishing less efficient. You've always got to think about covering your options, but look how that's just dead, completely dead. That's why you don't do it. Whereas if we get a flatbed feeder,
When I've had my feeder come back like that, I've always thought it's because the mix is wrong, but you obviously should be putting 50-50 in that type.
that's
of
right,
stuff.
exactly. You're using the wrong feeder.
Is that the same if you do like, when you say 50-50, if you do like a 20-80, like type, would still do the
Exactly the same. You're still blocking the holes up, aren't you? You're still blocking the holes up. You need that aeration between each pellet for the pellets to escape. Right, okay, so a flatbed feeder now. You'll love this. This is amazing, and this is why a flatbed feeder is so effective. Hybrid feeder is for everything, and more so deeper waters, which bodes well with the winter, longer range fishing. A flatbed's a little bit different. A flatbed is a fast way of catching fish, so it's good for chucking up to islands, or when you're on a peg and you know you're going to be catching a lot of fish. So in a few weeks' time, I'll be using a flatbed on this lake, feeding pellets at 5, 6, 7 metres, especially if I've got the wind in my face. In deep water, it's 8-9 foot, but I want a quick reaction because they're following the feeder down. All the fish are shallow, they're following the feeder down as if it's a ball of paste, and they're attacking it straight away, so I want everything to work quickly. So this is where this is deadly. And it's exactly the same mix, a 50-50. Wash the feeder off. So put the hook bait in, like that. I'm just going to leave it on the top because I want it to work quickly. Press it in mega hard. Feel how hard that is now, and also feel the weight of the feeder. Mega heavy. So now I've turned that into a 45 gram feeder. They actually weigh 32 grams without any bait, so it's 47 grams. Solid.
Do you ever put the upbait in last, so you bury the upbait?
No, no, because you'll see what I mean when I put it in. Now you can imagine with the hybrid feeder principle what I've explained, the fish can't get to that feed unless you get a real aggressive fish that just wants to suck the bait out. They can't get to it, and this is why they're a bit cautious, and this is why they take the particles around. Therefore, there's a great chance they'll take your upbait very. That's exactly. Yeah, you're pissing. You want to piss the fish off.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Right. So let me just give it one more squeeze.
I think a lot of people stop using them now, and hybrids have become more fashionable. Because I used to use them all the time, but I just seem to think the hybrids are the easy option. But now you've explained about the pellets of the ground bait.
Yeah, knowledge is.
I understand why I should be using that.
That's right. Knowledge. This is why you're here. You're here to learn. You know, knowledge is power. Right. So let's chuck that in. Now we're using a flatbed feeder where the water can get into the mix from every single angle. And what's going to happen is that mix is just going to, the top level is going to escape, but when I'm landing fish with this mix, I've still got bait on the feeder, which is what I want. So eventually that's going to come loose. Now also what you've got to remember is the aggression of the feeder going through 8 foot of water, and this is why you've got to pack it in quite hard, because if you don't pack it in hard, trust me, that bait is going to come off on the impact. Regardless of whether it hits the lead side or the other side, it's going to impact the feeder and create it to come off very quickly. And this is why if you're using a flatbed feeder, you've got to get your mix right. Now, that's actually surprised me what's happened there. Do it again. That's still stuck in. I've done it a bit too low, that. Let's do it again. But the thing is, a flatbed feeder, the beauty about a flatbed feeder, water's still all right, is the water can get into the mix very, very quickly. Where's the ground bait? Here we are. And this is why I always want my hook bait visible with a flatbed, because I want my hook bait to roll away as quickly as possible, but I want my main body of feed still around the feeder. And especially when you're commercial fishing, you're fishing for small fish, this is such an effective way. But I only like to use ground bait, like what I've already explained, with a flatbed feeder, simply because it just bodes well for the summertime. So eventually that will roll away like that. But let's say, for example, I hook a fish now, or even to the point where I'm leaving it in a bit longer, that will still remain on the feeder. So even if you're having to leave your feeder in for 2 or 3 minutes longer than what you think or you'd like to, there's a reason why fish are coming up to your feeder, because there's still bait around it. Now I'm going to tell you a very interesting story, but obviously Tom won't be able to promote this, but it is very interesting. So when